Pain is something we all fear, and for some, it leads to the most tragic end. In this video, we will share 5 real stories of the most painful deaths of all time. These are true accounts of people who endured unimaginable suffering. It was a calm June day in 2016 when 23-year-old Colin Nathaniel Scott, a recent graduate from Pacific University, set out to explore Yellowstone National Park with his sister Sable. The siblings, excited to experience the park's famous geysers and hot springs, never expected what would happen next. Yellowstone is a beautiful place, but it hides serious dangers. The Norris Geyser Basin, where Colin and Sable went, is one of the park's most dangerous areas. The hot springs here can reach temperatures of up to 400 degrees Fahrenheit just below the surface. The ground around them is thin and fragile, making the area even more risky. Despite clear warning signs, the siblings ventured off the designated boardwalk. They were looking for a spot to hot pot, a dangerous activity where people soak in the hot springs. These springs are not only scalding but also filled with toxic chemicals, making them deadly if not treated with extreme caution. Colin and Sable did not realize how unsafe the ground was. While testing the temperature of a small spring, Colin lost his balance. He slipped and fell into the boiling acidic water. Sable, horrified, could only watch as her brother disappeared beneath the surface. She immediately called for help, but the situation was already critical. Yellowstone rangers responded quickly, but recovering Colin's body was a huge challenge. The spring was not just hot but highly acidic as well. This combination made it almost impossible to survive such an accident or to safely recover a body. The recovery team did find some of Colin's personal items, including his wallet and flip-flops, near the spring's edge. However, a lightning storm forced them to pause their efforts. When they returned the next day, there was nothing left of Colin. His body had completely dissolved in the boiling acidic water. The pain Colin must have felt in those moments is unimaginable. The boiling water would have burned his skin instantly, causing severe, deep burns within seconds. His body would have been in shock, but the intense pain from the heat and acidity would have been excruciating. The high temperature of the water and its ability to dissolve organic material meant that Colin's body was quickly destroyed. Park officials confirmed that it was impossible to recover Colin's body due to the extreme conditions in the spring. His tragic death showed the dangers of Yellowstone's geothermal features. While the park's beauty is stunning, its hot springs are incredibly dangerous and should not be approached without caution. Colin's death is a painful reminder of the risks that exist in the park. Despite clear warnings, many visitors still ignore safety measures and venture too close to the dangerous hot springs. The thin crust around these features can collapse under a person's weight, and stepping off the boardwalk can have fatal consequences. Yellowstone Superintendent Dan Wenck emphasized the importance of following the park's rules to prevent such tragedies. He reminded the public that the thermal features are unpredictable, and venturing too close can lead to devastating results. In fact, since the park's establishment, there have been at least 22 recorded deaths from thermal features. Colin's death, however, remains one of the most painful and disturbing. Sadly, Colin's death was not an isolated incident. Rangers have dealt with many cases of tourists ignoring safety guidelines, whether to get closer to wildlife or explore off-limits areas. The fragile ground around hot springs is a hidden threat that can lead to disaster with a single wrong step. After the accident, the park decided not to release the footage taken by Sable at the scene, out of respect for the family. What is known is that Colin was a bright, promising young man. He had recently graduated summa cum laude in psychology and was preparing to start a doctoral program in the fall. Colin had also worked at the Jackson Bottom Wetlands Preserve, where he was remembered fondly for his dedication to the environment. For Sable, the pain of witnessing her brother's tragic death will stay with her forever. Despite her desperate calls for help, nothing could be done to save Colin. The decision to halt recovery efforts only confirmed the harsh reality. There was nothing left of Colin to bring home to his family. Colin's story is a tragic lesson on how quickly adventure can turn to loss, especially when the dangers of nature are underestimated. It was November 23, 2018, in Polk County, Florida, when 76-year-old Loretta Pickard experienced an agonizing death. Loretta, who lived alone in a remote log cabin and relied on a walker, was trapped inside her home when a fire broke out. She called 911 immediately, and the tragic events that followed revealed both her physical suffering and the emotional distress she endured as help failed to arrive. Loretta's 911 call began calmly as she told the dispatcher her house was on fire. The dispatcher asked questions and gathered information, but as the minutes passed, it became clear that Loretta was trapped. The walker severely limited her mobility, and the fire was quickly spreading. Despite reassurances that help was on the way, Loretta remained on the line for 20 minutes as flames consumed her home. At first, Loretta's voice was steady, but as time went on, it became clear she was struggling. She asked if her door was unlocked, but soon her tone shifted to desperation. "They know I'm in here, right?" she asked, hoping that someone would come for her. She could no longer see the flames, but the smoke was suffocating. With each breath, her lungs filled with toxic fumes, and the pain from the smoke was overwhelming. Outside, the firefighters were struggling to contain the fire, but the cabin was far from a water source, and they had limited resources. They couldn't enter the home because the fire was too intense, and they were waiting for more water. The dispatcher heard Loretta's labored breathing as the minutes ticked by, and she continued to assure Loretta that help was coming, even though nothing was happening. By 7:06 p.m., the dispatcher confirmed Loretta was trapped, but it wasn't until 7:10 p.m. that the firefighters were made aware of her difficulty breathing. Yet, no one entered the home. For nearly 20 minutes, Loretta remained alone, the heat and smoke overwhelming her. At 7:26 p.m., she could see the flames closing in on her. In a state of panic, she screamed for help, but by then, it was too late. Her body had likely been burned by the fire, and her lungs were filled with smoke. The dispatcher continued to speak to her, saying, "I'm still here with you," but Loretta was no longer responding. At 7:28 p.m., Loretta's voice went silent. Her body succumbed to the smoke and heat. The fire continued to rage outside, but by 10:26 p.m., the fire was finally under control, and Loretta's body was found charred beyond recognition. The pain Loretta suffered during those final moments is unimaginable. Trapped in her home with no way to escape, she was aware that rescuers were nearby, but never entered to save her. Every breath she took must have been excruciating, filled with smoke and the heat of the fire. Her body was likely burned by the flames, and the terror of knowing she was dying with no help in sight added to her suffering. The aftermath was even more painful for Loretta's family. They learned that firefighters were on the scene for over 14 minutes before Loretta died, but did not attempt to rescue her. Worse still, the lead firefighter, Captain James Williams, was found to have posted a picture of the fire on Snapchat while Loretta was still inside. This careless behavior caused the family even more grief. Williams was later suspended, but the damage had been done. An investigation into the fire revealed several failures. Communication between the dispatcher and firefighters was poor, and the fire department struggled due to the remote location of Loretta's cabin. There was also a lack of manpower and experience. The failure to act quickly led to Loretta's death. Loretta's family filed a lawsuit, claiming that the 911 operator did not give proper instructions and that the fire department's response was inadequate. They sought compensation for the loss of their loved one, hoping to prevent similar tragedies in the future. Loretta Pickard's death wasn't just a tragedy, it was a failure in communication, leadership, and compassion. Her story is a painful lesson on the importance of quick, decisive action in emergencies. It was December 1st, 2018, in Logan, Queensland, Australia. David Dowell, a 34-year-old father of 3, was celebrating Christmas with close friends and family. David, known for his sense of humor, was in high spirits that night. His partner of 15 years, Alira, and their 3 daughters, Alyssa, Claudia, and Sage, were also there, along with other families. David was always the life of the party, enjoying every moment and making everyone laugh. During the celebration, a friend dared him to eat a gecko, something David, known for accepting outrageous dares, might have done without a second thought. However, the events that followed would soon take a tragic turn. The details surrounding whether David actually ate the gecko were unclear. Some attendees claimed they saw him do it, while others weren't sure. Alira admitted she wasn't paying close attention amidst the chaos of the party. Still, the possibility remained that David had swallowed the reptile. The next day, December 2nd, David began to feel unwell. Initially thinking it was just a hangover, his condition worsened by December 3rd. He began vomiting and experiencing severe stomach pain. His symptoms grew more intense, and although his family thought it might be something simple, they called for an ambulance. Paramedics initially suspected gastroenteritis or a bad hangover. David was taken to the Mater Hospital in Brisbane, where the situation took a shocking turn. By December 4th, he was diagnosed with a salmonella infection. Doctors initially considered common causes like undercooked chicken, but as his condition worsened, Alira mentioned the gecko dare to the medical team. This led them to consider the possibility that the lizard might have been the source of the infection. David's health deteriorated rapidly. His stomach became severely bloated, and he was in what his family described as absolute agony. He vomited green fluid, passed dark urine, and developed fluid in his lungs. Despite the medical staff's efforts, his organs began to fail. His testicles swelled to an enormous size, leaking fluid, a symptom that added to his immense suffering. His family described it as if he were rotting from the inside out. Doctors tried to manage his pain, but it was so severe that he was placed in a medically induced coma. His sister Hannah recalled how heartbreaking it was to see him in such pain. The once lively David was now fighting for his life. On December 11th, just 10 days after the party, David underwent emergency surgery. His body, already overwhelmed, couldn't withstand the strain. Despite the medical team's efforts, David passed away during the procedure, leaving his family in shock and grief. David's death raised many questions. His family, especially Alira and their daughters, struggled to understand what had happened. Alira remembered David as a loving, fun father who adored spending time with their children. He was like a big kid, she said, remembering how much he enjoyed playing with them. Now, they were left without him, facing an unbearable loss. In the aftermath, medical experts and David's family tried to piece together the cause of his death. Could the gecko have been responsible? Experts, including Mark Turner from the University of Queensland, confirmed that reptiles like geckos can carry salmonella, and if David had eaten the gecko, the bacteria could have caused the infection. However, since no one could definitively confirm that David had consumed the reptile, the cause remained uncertain. David's family also questioned whether his medical care had been sufficient. Hannah expressed frustration, saying the family had to ask for pain relief for David and that his condition wasn't taken seriously until it was too late. The moment he got moved into the intensive care unit, that's when they got serious, she said. The Mater Hospital responded by expressing condolences and maintaining that they had provided appropriate care. The case was reviewed by the coroner, who agreed that the hospital had acted correctly. Still, David's family couldn't shake the feeling that something had gone wrong. On what would have been David's 35th birthday, his family gathered by the Logan River, a place he loved to fish, to hold a vigil in his honor. They released paper boats with messages for him, a quiet tribute to a man whose life had been cut tragically short. David's family may never have the full answers they were looking for. Whether the gecko was truly the cause of his illness or if something else played a role, the uncertainty only added to their pain. What remained was the memory of David, a loving father, partner, and friend whose life brought joy to all who knew him. It was April 12, 2011, just weeks before graduation at Yale University. Michel Dufault, a 22-year-old student majoring in astronomy and physics, was working late in the Stirling Chemistry Laboratory machine shop. Known for her brilliance and dedication, Michelle often pushed herself hard in her studies, earning admiration from friends and family. She was also active in sports and played the saxophone in Yale's precision marching band. But on this night, an accident would tragically end her life. Michelle was using a lathe, a powerful machine that shapes materials by rotating them against cutting tools. Lathe work is inherently risky, and Yale's chemistry department had strict policies to ensure safety. Only those who had completed a safety course were allowed to use the equipment, and Michelle had taken the necessary training. Despite this, a single mistake would prove fatal. It is believed that Michelle's long brown hair, which fell well below her shoulders, got caught in the lathe's spinning mechanism. The force of the machine pulled her head toward it, dragging her into the rotating parts. Michelle couldn't break free, and the lathe twisted her hair tightly, causing her death by asphyxiation due to neck compression. By the time emergency responders arrived around 2:33 a.m., she had already passed away. Michelle's body was discovered by fellow students, and the scene was heartbreaking. Those who found her could do nothing but watch as the weight of the situation settled in. The tragedy shook the Yale community, with students and faculty struggling to comprehend how such an accident could happen in a lab known for its strict safety measures. Yale President Richard Levin expressed his sorrow, calling the incident a true tragedy. He promised an immediate investigation into the lab's safety protocols. Michelle's family was devastated. Her grandfather, Robert Dufault, described her as a living saint, while her uncle Frederick called her a wonderful kid with so much potential. Her death was not only a loss to her family, but to the world of science, as Michelle was on the brink of an exciting career. Michelle's high school teachers also remembered her as a brilliant student. Robert Henderson Jr., her former head of school, recalled her as one of the most promising students he had ever encountered. Despite her academic success, Michelle was humble and never sought attention for her abilities. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or OSHA, launched an investigation into whether the lab had followed safety standards. Experts pointed out that long hair and loose clothing can pose serious risks when operating equipment like a lathe. OSHA regulations require hair to be tied back to prevent accidents. The investigation sought to determine if more safety measures could have prevented the tragedy, such as additional safeguards or better supervision. In response to the accident, Yale took immediate action. The lab was closed, classes were cancelled, and a comprehensive review of safety practices began. President Levin assured the campus that student safety was a top priority and that steps would be taken to prevent similar incidents. A vigil was held in Michelle's honor, where friends, classmates, and faculty shared memories of her kindness, intelligence, and determination. The loss was felt deeply by everyone who knew her. Michelle's dreams of graduation and a promising career in oceanography were cut short, and her death left a void that could never be filled. In the moments before her passing, Michelle must have experienced a terrifying struggle. The lathe's powerful force likely left her with little chance to escape. The pressure on her neck caused immense pain and fear. While it's impossible to know exactly what she went through, the accident is a tragic reminder of the risks associated with powerful machinery. Michelle's family, friends, and the Yale community will always remember her. Her story highlights the dangers of working with machinery and the importance of strict safety protocols. Michelle Dufault's death was a loss that should never have happened, and we must learn from it to ensure it never happens again. It was a quiet evening in 2014 in Korla, Xinjiang, China. Wu Wenyuan, an 18-year-old student, had just wrapped up her day of studies. As she lay in bed, her iPhone 4S was charging beside her. Wu lived with her sister, who was out at work that night. The apartment was calm, with only the faint hum of electronics breaking the silence. Tragically, this seemingly ordinary evening would end in devastation. Wu was a hard-working teenager who had moved to Korla to pursue her education while staying connected with her family back in Urumqi. She often chatted with her loved ones, especially her sister and friends, through her phone. Life was normal, filled with the small joys and challenges of student life. When Wu's sister returned home from work, she was immediately alarmed by an acrid, burning smell. The sense of dread grew as she rushed to the bedroom, calling out to Wu but getting no reply. Upon entering, she was met with a horrifying scene. Wu lay motionless on the bed, her body severely burned. The sight was devastating, her skin blackened and charred, with her shattered phone beside her. Overwhelmed by shock and grief, her sister called for help, but it was too late. Wu had passed away. Investigators arrived promptly, uncovering chilling details about what had happened. Wu's autopsy revealed burn marks on her neck, hands, and left foot, consistent with electrocution. The cause of death was identified as electrical leakage from her phone, which had been connected to a counterfeit charger. This faulty charger had failed catastrophically, sending a deadly current through WU's body. To grasp the severity of WU's experience, one must understand the effects of electrocution. When a high-voltage current enters the body, it disrupts critical functions of the heart, muscles, and nerves. The pain is overwhelming, with muscles contracting uncontrollably and skin burning internally and externally. It's a torturous process, and Wu likely endured immense suffering as the current coursed through her body. The counterfeit charger was the root cause of this tragedy. Unlike authentic chargers, counterfeit ones often lack essential safety features designed to prevent electrical surges or leaks. These flaws can result in dangerous accidents, as seen in WU's case, where the charger allowed a fatal current to pass directly into her body. The news of WU's death spread quickly, leaving her family and friends heartbroken. Her loved ones were left to grapple with the sudden loss of a young woman who had so much promise. Wu's story also served as a grim example of the hidden dangers posed by counterfeit electronics. Sadly, WU's case was not unique. In 2015, a similar tragedy occurred in Moscow, Russia. A 24-year-old woman named Evgenia Sviridenko lost her life when her plugged-in phone slipped into the bath she was using. Her phone, like Wu's, had been connected to a counterfeit charger. Evgenia's roommate found her lifeless body in the water, a victim of electrocution. The electrical current caused severe burns, muscle contractions, and likely instant cardiac arrest. Once again, a counterfeit charger was to blame. These heartbreaking incidents underscore the risks of using substandard electronics. Authentic chargers undergo rigorous safety testing, while counterfeit ones are often poorly made, lacking mechanisms to prevent electrical faults. This negligence can lead to fatal consequences. In Wu's case, her iPhone had reportedly been purchased from a shop in Urumqi. The store later contacted her family to discuss the matter, but no resolution could undo the immense loss. Wu's death tells us of how a seemingly simple act, like charging a phone, can have deadly consequences when counterfeit products are involved. This story highlights the critical importance of using certified genuine chargers and being vigilant against counterfeit electronics. It is a sobering lesson about safety in our everyday choices, showing how such tragedies could be avoided with proper precautions.